And now we're live. So, John C. Wright, thank you so much for taking time to come talk to us today. I'm joined here by Thursday, who's here. So, having a little bit of internet problems. So, if I drop out, he's going to take over the interview. We were planning on like a fun, like he was going to come in and say surprise, but you know, this interview is going to be, I think, it's going to be a really good time. And Thursday, I know you're a big fan of John's work, and yeah, so. Now, before we started the interview, we were kind of talking a little bit about why Stubenville, like, because I've had multiple people text me in preparation for this interview saying like, "Oh, you've got John C. Wright on," and so Thursday, do you want to finish that thought about like why you think Stubenville is such like a sci-fi hotbed?
I don't know. Okay, I should say I don't know for sure why it is that way, but I do know it is that way because I picked up, a year and a half ago, maybe almost 2 years ago now, I picked up A Canticle for Leibowitz because I'd heard it was a classic of written by a Catholic at the time. We pray for Walter Miller Jr. It seems that he might have fallen away, but also, if you know his life story, understandable trauma. So I read it and I was raving over it, and I think it was almost 2 years ago because I was still doing a lot of stuff with New Polity and the Stubenville Workshop and the College of St. Joseph at the time. And I mentioned to Mike Sullivan, who's the president of College of St. Joseph, that I was reading it, and he was talking about how great it was. And as I finished it, I was like more and more in love with it. And so I recommended it to like one or two people. And they recommended it, and then I let somebody borrow my copy, and then they asked if they could let one of their friends borrow my copy. So I think my copy of A Canticle for Leibowitz was read 5 times in 2 months, and then people started buying more copies. And so I slowly discovered that a lot of the men in Stubenville are very into science fiction, and especially love when people tell Catholic or Christian or, just real stories through the medium. So I don't know if I can say why, but I do know that is a reality of Stubenville from that experience. So.
Okay. All right. Well, cool. So, John, welcome.
Thank you.
A little bit about, I wanted to do this, and I know you've told your story many times. I've listened to some interviews. I just kind of want to walk through your life story here a little bit and just like talk about your upbringing. I know in previous interviews you've mentioned that you were kind of like an angry atheist. So, like, were you raised in a Christian household?
I was not an angry atheist. I was a vituperative, evangelizing atheist who was rigorously logical. I disbelieved in God for completely unemotional reasons. I am not like any of these modern atheists you'll ever meet. I was philosophically inclined from a young age and had been an atheist since age 7.
Oh.
At that age, I talked my father out of having us go to church by means of what I thought at that time was a logical argument. And because it actually worked and we did stop going to church, I had a great faith in the power of logic to persuade people. And so I attempted throughout my entire life from 7 to 35 to test every assumption in a very Cartesian fashion. I attempted to use as much skepticism as one could use without becoming self-destructive. And I should say parenthetically that many modern skeptics are self-destructively skeptical. John Wright's first rule of philosophy is if you have a philosophy that doesn't allow for the philosopher to exist, you're on the wrong track. Check your premises. Okay. So after so many years of having this extremely logical system it was airtight. I thought it was ironclad. I checked every link in the reasoning over and over again. I thought the common notions and the axioms on which it was based were unapproachable, unimpeachable. Then I, at about the age 35, excuse me. You said you wanted to know my life story. Do you want to know my life story or my conversion story? My life story is not that interesting. I'm the son of a naval officer.
Okay.
We moved around a lot when I was young. I was raised on post for the most part, so I'm used to environments that are really well manicured and tended and highly organized, which may have had something to do with the way I approach life. I went to St. John's College in Annapolis, which is the home of the Great Books program, and if you haven't heard of it, you're you should be a little sad, because it's about the only educational institution in America that still adheres to the old standards, adheres to the medieval standards of what an education should be like. There's no tests and there's no grades there. Everyone follows the exact same course of study. Basically, every class is a small class and is a discussion class. There are seminars twice weekly, and we go through the great books of Western literature in chronological order, starting with Homer and ending with garbage. The senior year, the modern writers are not as rigorous as the ancients. They're just not. They're sentimental. Nietzsche and Sartre are sentimentalists. They don't give logical arguments. They give expressions of internal mental confusion. Euclid is logical. Aquinas is logical. Aristotle is logical. You see what I'm saying?
Okay, gotcha.
That's my upbringing. That's my upbringing. My approach to life.
So you were reading like Aquinas and Euclid, and like it's just part of I guess your college education then.
That was my college education. Yes, I then went to law school. I passed the bar in New York in my first attempt, which is better than the Kennedy boy did. I waved into D.C. and I took the bar again when I moved to Virginia. But I was a failure as a lawyer. So on my resume I'm careful to put down failed lawyer as a one of the bullet points of my illustrious career. After that, I got into newspaper work. I was started as a reporter and then an editor, using my legal background to cover the court system, to cover legal issues. And from there, I was tired of staying awake till 4 a.m. to put the paper to bed. So I went into technical writing.
Okay.
Which is still my current career. I am not a successful enough science fiction writer to quit my day job. And there's already gray hairs in my beard, so I'm getting a little impatient with my fans. I wish they would buy more of my books.
Okay. Well, actually, speaking of that, so where should people go to actually purchase your books? Where's the best place for that?
They're mostly available on Amazon and in most
where do you get the best cut, though?
That's
what we're asking.
Buy it from me directly. I also get a nice cut from Box Day, Castalia House Books. Some of my books are out of print, and I'm in the middle of looking for a new publisher. The transition from this traditional publishing model to the internet model has left me high and dry. I'm just really not sure where to put my books to put them in front of people's eyes.
Okay.
So if anyone in your audience knows what the magic secret is to make it so that I can have Galaxy's Edge by Nick Cole level of sales, please write me and tell me.
Okay, good to know. And then your email address is listed on your website. That's how I got in contact with you. So
John C. Wright 2001 at gmail.com. Yes.
Yeah. So okay, I don't know. Is there any significance to the 2001 behind that, or is that just like
nope? It's just I happen to luck into having the same name as a famous book by Arthur C. Clarke. So no, it's not one I picked. It was
like automatically generated.
The Omnivac created it for me. They consulted with Colossus and Skynet, and they decided that would be my name from now on.
Wonderful. Okay, so
and I just want to say that I'm completely loyal to our new computer overlord. So
I, for one, am satisfied.
I'm satisfied. Yes. Yeah, I can see you and I watch the same comedy shows.
Yeah. So okay. So you had
conversion story. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, my conversion was basically in two parts. There was the natural part and the supernatural part. The natural part is easier to explain, but might be slightly boring for your listeners. But I will sum up. What happened after I had children was that I began to look around and see three things. First, my fellow atheists were not the Vulcans with a hammerlock on logic that I was. They didn't seem to have a really rational and coherent worldview, and their arguments consisted mostly of ad hominem. When after 2001 and thereabouts, the four horsemen of new atheism started getting popular, it was a revolution in the little community of atheists where I lived, that because no one had ever paid much attention to us before because we're crackpots. But their arguments were so bad, were so not well put together, not well constructed, that I was embarrassed to be seen with them. I was embarrassed to be a member of their same school of thought. You see, Christopher Hitchens just makes historical errors in his reasoning. Most wars were not caused by religious sentiment. Okay, it's just simply not true. My fellow atheists also were trying to get "In God We Trust" removed from the money. They wanted to remove the motto of the United States from the American dollar bill. They wanted to remove the cross on top of 1/4 of the seal of the city seal of I don't remember if it was Los Angeles or if it was San Francisco, where there was the seal of the city showed a Spanish mission.
Right.
And if you know the history of California, you know that the Spanish missionaries are the ones who brought civilization to that area,
right,
before California was part of the United States, and it's part of history.
Like
and they wanted, and there was this, and the city seal is divided into quarters, so only 1/4 of the picture had a tiny picture of a Spanish mission, and they wanted to remove the cross on that. And I was like, my fellow atheists, why are we trying to remove symbols? We are the ones who don't believe in magic. They are the ones who believe in magic. They're the ones who are the superstitious, primitive, backwards people. We're the brights. We're the enlightened ones. Why are we afraid of symbolism? It does. If you don't believe in God, it does you no harm if there's a public monument that has a cross on it to World War I veterans. Okay. So they just became increasingly irrational. You see. So that the first part was I started being embarrassed to be among irrational people who were defending atheism. The second was I started reading C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien and G.K. Chesterton, and these men were solid men. They were mature men. Their view of life was not cartoonishly simplistic. Their view of life was realistic. The people they talked about sounded like real people to me. The people my atheist friends talked about didn't sound like real people to me. When I say that, I mean, if you're an atheist, you have to believe that 95% of humanity are people prone to bizarre, simplistic hallucinations about a sky father, which is as silly as believing in Santa Claus. You think everyone but you is a grown-up who believes in Santa Claus if you're an atheist. You see? Now, what model of the universe explains why so many human beings would be so insane? I mean, literally insane. Literally people who see hallucinations, who say prayers and think they are answered when they're not, who see miracles when there's no such thing as miracles. You see, if you've ever, I don't know if either of you have talked to atheists or if you know what their mindset is, but that's where I was. Now, my model of the universe couldn't explain that. Why was the people on my side, Dawkins, blithering fools, and the people on their side, G.K. Chesterton, C.S. Lewis, men as wise and profound as any philosopher who ever took pen to paper? Okay, so. Then a friend of mine, and here's the other thing. I used to be I was raised to believe in the sexual revolution. I was raised to believe that anything two adults did in the privacy of their bedroom was licit, provided all parties consented, provided there was legal consent.
Consent makes everything okay.
Well, that's what I believed at the time.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I grew up. then I had kids. Then I saw that I mentioned that I attempted to live my life according to a strict philosophy. There's a philosophy called Stoicism. It's something that was propounded by the ancient Romans. Marcus Aurelius was a Stoic. He was an emperor. Epictetus was a Stoic. He was an ex-slave. It spanned the gamut of ancient Roman thinking. The Stoics believe that you have to control your emotions, that your emotions have to be in line with nature, in line with reason. Okay. If you want a good example of the Stoic, look at Mr. Spock on Star Trek. The reason why his character is so appealing is because he doesn't let his emotions control him. Right? He has to wrestle against them. Well, if you're a Stoic, then you believe your emotions have to be in line with reason. If you're a libertarian or a libertine, you believe that your emotions are sovereign. That if you feel the sexual desire, for example, to another man or someone you with a creature with whom you cannot perform the mating act, if you have the mating emotion to someone with whom you do not have the mating capability, that is licit, according to the libertines and libertarians. So here I was as a Stoic libertarian, and I thought, well, wait a minute, there's a contradiction here in my thinking. Despite the fact that having tried to check every link in my reasoning for 35 years and trying to make sure my argument was airtight and my premises were unimpeachable. So a friend of mine then asked me, a Christian friend of mine, oh, no, excuse me, let me tell you one other slight anecdote first. I started reasoning about the human sexuality and its nature and what the nature of desire was and what the nature of how one properly should live one's life, given that one has passions that sometimes one can control, sometimes one cannot. Okay. And I thought prudence requires that if you're going to indulge in the mating act, you have to make provision for the possible outcome of the mating act, which is to say children. Prudence therefore requires that you prepare a nest for the possible egg you may lay, because obviously killing the child is insupportable. It's infanticide.
Right.
Okay. And so you have to make sure that your sexual passions are lined up with a passion that leads toward a home, a safe place to raise kids, because humans are outrichial. We can't just lay eggs in the sand like a sea turtle. We have to take care of our kids. Well, if you carry out this, I'm not going to bore you with the step by step, but if you carry out this logic to its final conclusion, then you realize that contraception is a grave moral evil, because it divorces the passions of mating from the act of mating. It makes sex not sex. It makes the sex act and the outcome of the sex act separate from each other, which they should not be. Okay? So I come to this conclusion that's astonishing to me, that homosexuality is not licit, other sexual deviations and perversions are not licit, and that sex outside of marriage is not licit. Moreover, therefore, the passions that lead to sex outside of marriage are also not licit. I hope you understand how much against my own desires, willpower, and the way I live my life this was. Okay?
Yeah.
The philosophy was forcing me to this conclusion, which was the most unpleasant conclusion possible, because it meant that men had to control themselves in the one area where no one wants to control himself. We want to leap into the arms of the next beautiful one we see. So of all the people, my hated enemies, the Christians, were the only ones who also preached this. And of Christians, the most conservative and superstitious Christians of all, the hated Catholics, the ones who were the butt of every joke and who were in charge of not only the Inquisition, but all evils of mankind. I was raised in an English-speaking country, and the English-speaking countries all take their propaganda from 16th century lies told by the church, the Anglican Church.
The black legend is 100% dogma.
Yeah. So I'm forced into a position where I'm defending my enemies, the Catholics, against my friends, the atheists. And my atheists are here saying, anything, if you have two emotions that contradict each other, logic has to go by the wayside. And I'm like, what? We're supposed to be the rational ones here. We're supposed to be the adults in the conversation. We're the ones who believe in reality, and everyone else around us believes in Santa Claus. How can you say this, foolish atheist?
Mm-hmm.
And then a friend of mine, and then I talked to two friends of mine. Both of them are Christians. And I said, is sex outside of marriage licit? I asked them as Christians. You will never guess what they said. They both said yes. They said, one said, if the girl is willing, anything that you'd have, any sexual act you have with her is okay, provided she consents. And the other one said, if you love him, if you love this is a woman, if you love the man and you want to marry him, it's okay to have sex before marriage. And I said, that's not what your God teaches. Not only your God, but no God teaches that. The God of Muhammad does not teach that. The God of the Norse, Odin, does not teach that. Hera upholds the marriage vows. The Vestal virgins would be killed and buried alive if they violated their oath of abstinence. The Buddha doesn't teach that. I was talking to my friend who was a Christian, and he was saying things that no religion on earth has ever taught. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, where did you get this crazy idea that merely because you have a desire, you should act on it? If I have an unhealthy appetite for eating sand and gravel, should I just say, oh, for me, it's nutritious now?
Right.
But then he asked me a question. He said, what would convince you to change your mind? If an angel came down right now and you saw him with your eyes and he stood in front of you and proclaimed the gospel, would you believe it? And I said, answering honestly, I said, no, I would assume it was a hallucination. And then I went back and I brooded on Rodin's The Thinker on top of a rock or something. And I said, wait a minute, my philosophy that I'm so proud of, that I've worked so many years to try to make coherent, it's a circular argument. I don't believe in God because I don't believe in God. That there's no, if your philosophy doesn't allow you to change your model when new evidence arises, it's not a good philosophy. I was stumped. I said, how could this be? I'm so logical. I'm so rational. I'm such a great guy. I polished my mirror and kissed it a few times. By the way, I was a very proud man, in case you can't tell.
Yeah.
So I'm still a proud man, but now I'm not proud of being proud. Now I'm trying to work on it. So I said, I'm a rational fellow. I'll put this to the test. I'll put this to an evidential test. So I looked left and looked right and made sure that my atheist friends were not watching. And I got down on my knees in my kitchen and folded my hands and I said, dear God, I know you don't exist. I can prove it with mathematical certainty, like Euclid proving that opposite angles are equal. But as a philosopher, my sense of honor tells me the philosopher always must admit the possibility that he's wrong. Since there's a possibility I'm wrong, and since there's no possible logical way you can prove to me that you exist, there's no way at all you can prove you exist, because I would like you to prove to me that you exist. I would like you to give me evidence so convincing that I can't talk myself out of it. And if you can't do this, it means you're not omnipotent. And if you won't do it, it means you're not benevolent. And in either case, if you're neither omnipotent nor benevolent, then you're not God. You're not worthy of worship. Thanking you in advance for your cooperation. Signed, John C. Wright. I got up. I dusted off my knees. Honor is satisfied. Okay. 2 days later, I had a heart attack because I thought I knew what I was doing. I was tampering with forces beyond human understanding. I was like a child who sticks a fork into a light socket, and I didn't realize that my experiment would come to life and rend me. So there I am, dying on the floor. My wife is a Christian. She is a Christian Scientist, in fact, and they have a healing ministry. So I said to her, either drive me to the hospital or call one of your Christian Science practitioners. She called the Christian Science practitioner. He said, now, in case you're not familiar with their practice, a Christian Science practitioner takes a fee for praying for you for healing, and that's their livelihood. They don't have day jobs, so they get enough money from that. It's successful enough for them to do it. They also collect evidence of their miracles in volumes of books that fill their libraries. If you go to Christian Science reading room, you can read 100 years worth of testified miracles, miracle healings that usually have at least 2 witnesses and usually have a doctor signing it. Not in every case. So the pain stopped like that. The guy said a prayer and the pain stopped. Now, that either was a miracle or it was a coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and since I had been dying, I said, wow, if that's a coincidence, I would like more coincidences like that in my life, because that was really useful to me. Okay. I said, good gravy. Now, at this time, I thought it might have been an attack of pleurisy. I didn't know what it was. It was just a pain in my chest, but it was very painful. I was writhing on the ground, screaming. So I said to the wife, I want to go to the hospital anyway, just to see what was wrong with me. So we drive to the hospital. They check me out. They say, you have 5 blocked arteries in your heart. I said, I thought the human heart only had 4 arteries. How could I have 5? They said, you should be dead. I said, oh, okay, well, that's nice. I had a very blunt nurse, So they signed me up. I was going to undergo surgery in the next day or two. So as I'm sitting there thinking, was that a miracle or was that not a miracle? I was then visited by the Holy Spirit. I don't know how to describe this to anyone who is my fellow atheist or anyone who has never had this thing happen to you before, but it's like having wine poured into a dirty cup. I was just suddenly filled with the Spirit. I became aware of the fact that I had a soul. That was not something I was aware of before. I knew I had a brain. I knew I had a mind. I was not a materialist. I mean, not a fool. Well, excuse me. I was not foolish in that respect. Mm-hmm. I don't think the human brain is just a computer, but I didn't believe in spirits. I didn't think the mind could outlast the body any more than you could have water in a cup that would outlast the cup, or that to me, when I was an atheist, if someone said, where does the spirit go after you die? I would say, well, where does the candle flame go after you snuff it out? It's just not there anymore. That's what I thought. I wasn't aware that I had a soul. Suddenly I was. And once you're aware of it, and I wasn't perceiving this through any sense impression, so there was no way my senses could be deceiving me, you see. Mm-hmm. It is just a primary fact. It was an axiom. It was an axiomatic fact. So God shows me himself. All my life, I had pursued the truth. I'd been in love with the truth. I'd been a philosopher, or tried to be. So a philosopher, someone who loves the truth. And then it turned and looked at me. And it was a real thing. The thoughts in my head, which I don't know where they come from. When a new thought comes in your head, where does it come from? Nothing comes from nothing, right? There's got to be a chain of cause and effect that come from somewhere. And if it's not coming from you, it's coming from outside you. Mm-hmm. That is a very uncomfortable conclusion for an atheist to come to, because there's no place for him to think outside thoughts can come. And I'm not talking about telepathy. I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm talking about what the structure of the human consciousness is that we seem to have some things in common. Some what Jung would call the shared unconscious of the human spirit. But I think mm-hmm. Jung was a little bit of a witch, just between you and me. Mm-hmm. So I saw God. It was rather remarkable to me since I was an atheist. I was then visited by 3 spirits over the next. I underwent surgery. I was recovering. I was visited by 3 spirits over the next 3 days, like Scrooge in a story. And one of them was God. He fills the universe and is made of pure love and is this divine light that is inexpressibly beautiful. One of them was his son, who I was very frightened of. This Jesus scared the bejesus out of me. And one of them was the Virgin Mary, who's a very sad and noble woman, hardworking woman. But she was just this little Jewish girl who was caught up in events beyond anything we could comprehend. She had to leave her house and flee to Egypt, and and her son was killed before her eyes, and she asked me what wrong had he done? Why did they kill my son? What he had done no wrong. I felt so sorry for this woman. She was so lovely. I would do anything to see her again. If I have to be a Christian to see her again and somehow get into heaven, it's worth it, no matter what the cost is. Beautiful woman. So I'm recovering from the hospital, and now that I've been visited by the Holy Spirit, which I could feel inside my body, I didn't need any painkillers. I didn't take any painkillers. Whenever the ache started, I simply prayed and the pain went away. Now, I don't know if you count that as a miracle, but it happened over and over again. It became commonplace in my life. I very rarely visit doctors these days, just because I saw prayer cure a heart attack. It can cure other things as well. One of the things that Jesus said to me was that God judges no man. He says, I will be your judge at the end of time. Now, when he said that to me, I said, oh, good. This means this has got to be a hallucination. This has got to be a dream of mine. It can't be real, because we all know God is very judgmental. Look at the flood of Noah. Look at all the things in the Old Testament. This is something I'm making up. It's not real. So after I got out of the hospital, I was recovering at home for about a month. And I decided to read the Bible, as you might expect for someone who had never read the Bible before and who just got visited by all three persons of the Holy Trinity. So I'm flipping through John, and in the 5th chapter of John, I come across word for word the same line. Maybe there was one or two words differently. God judges no man. I will be the judge in the judgment day at the end of time. And I said, wait a minute. How did I know this? How did I read this passage in a book I've never read before as an atheist? There's two possibilities. One is I hallucinated the heart attack, hallucinated the miracle cure, hallucinated all the hallucinations, and I read this book previously in my life and then made myself forget about it with my subconscious mind. And then my subconscious mind brought this to the surface in a dream so I could trick myself into believing in God. That's theory number one. Theory number two is that Christ talked to John and said it to him, and John wrote it down, and Christ talked to me and said the same thing to me because it's the same guy saying it. That's theory number two. Occam's razor cuts out theory number one, okay? I don't believe that I have the psychic ability to induce or to cure heart attacks for the sake of fooling myself with an elaborate self-deception scheme. Okay? If you're gonna believe in mystical heart attack abilities and mind reading and the ability to read the inside of books you haven't seen before, but you're not willing to believe in God, Occam's razor can do nothing for you. You're already believing in the supernatural. So
yeah. Now
you haven't been on TikTok then, because
they believe in the supernatural.
I mean, it's never mind. It was missed the joke. My bad.
I did miss the joke. I assume TikTok.
No, I wasn't saying you missed the joke. I was saying I delivered it poorly.
Is a pipeline straight to the inferno. In any case, I then had a religious experience where I was taken outside of my body and shown this deep structure of time by God, and the mind-body, the problem of the one and the many, and the problem of determinism and free will was solved for me, which is not something that normal hallucinations would cause. Now, I should mention, my brother-in-law is in a facility. He does hallucinate. I know what the signs are. I don't have any of those signs. It wasn't a dream. I've dreamed every night of my life. I know what a dream is. It wasn't a dream. Okay? And if it is such an elaborate hallucination or such an elaborate dream that I've lost my mind, then obviously I am in no position to judge whether I've lost my mind, because once you impeach my reason as the judge, I have no judge to which I can appeal the case. You see? So if I'm insane and I'm now a happier man and I live a better life. Oh, I should mention one other thing. Once the Holy Spirit visited me, I lost my fear of death, even though I was in a hospital being operated on for a heart attack. All my life as a Stoic, I tried to lose my fear of death. That is what Stoicism is for. We look at Socrates, the Stoics look at Socrates as their great example of how to face death unflinchingly. I could not do it when I was a pagan. I couldn't do it when I was an atheist. But I could do what the atheists want to do when I was a Christian. So I didn't lose anything from my previous life, but I gained the ability. I gained everything. You say.
Mm.
So if my atheist friends are scandalized by my change, all I can say is, if I'm wrong, the non-God in which I non-believe will not punish me for my non-belief anymore. Let's talk Pascal's wager. If I'm wrong, there's no harm to me, because if I'm wrong, then the worst that's happening is I have an untrue belief that is more useful than your true belief. Now, as a philosopher, I refuse to accept the idea that a true thing can be useless, that a true thing just causes sorrow and misery. That doesn't seem rational to me. The truth is the source of virtue. I mean, even an atheist has to recognize that. So, the only other change in my life is that my wife thinks I'm more emotional than I used to be, which is just not a good thing. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wow. Okay. So you have this amazing experience, and like a direct encounter.
But keep in mind, I don't want anyone to be jealous of my experience. Let me tell you two things. First, I was told not to talk about the details of exactly what they said to me. That made no sense to me at the time, and still doesn't.
Yeah.
But I'm a loyal soldier. I will obey orders from my superiors. But I did see in the Bible that Jesus also says similar things to some of the people he heals.
Yeah.
Don't tell anyone. What's up with that? I did not hear the secret of Fatima. I didn't get any special personal revelation. I was told things that you could read in the gospel. I wasn't told anything secret, so I have no idea why they don't want me to talk about the details of it. Okay.
Interesting.
But what I've revealed to you is what I've told everyone. So that's public knowledge.
Yeah. No, and I've heard that you say that in like an interview that you did like 14 years ago or something.
Yeah, if you read that interview, you're going to see almost the same phrases.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like I'm not at liberty to say.
I've told this story many times, so I have it down to a memorized pattern. But I will say that I don't want anyone to feel jealous of me, because this was the remedial class. Any rational person can look at the beauty and the intricacy of the universe and know that there's a God. Even a child can look at the universe and know there's a God. Okay? Children do. They automatically believe in the spirit world. They automatically know that there's a spirit behind things. Mm-hmm. Some of them grow up to be polytheists. Some of them grow up to be monotheists, but they all agree on the basics. Mm-hmm. Well, only an idiot has to have his only the stubbornest mule has to be hit over the head by a 2x4 to get with the program, and that was me. Okay, so
yeah. So I guess, how do you go from this experience to becoming Catholic and not like just some other like? Well,
I wanted to be a member of my wife's denomination because I firmly believe that children should be raised in one faith. Okay. Now, before we had kids, since I was an atheist and she was a Christian, we just agreed to raise the kids. I said, "You're the mom. Raise them to be Christian, because I cannot explain to them my complex philosophical reasons for why theft is bad and lying is impermissible. You can't explain Stoicism to a child, but you can explain Sky Daddy punish you." So I said, "Look, you raise them in your faith, and I'll just talk them out of it when they get old enough to be the age of reason." Okay, that was the agreement. So once I became Christian, I said, "Okay, I would like to join her denomination." Well, her denomination did not satisfy me. It was too thin of a soup. They, if you've ever, I don't know if any of you gentlemen have ever toyed with other denominations. I don't know if you're cradle Catholics or not, but
we are both not.
Yeah, both.
Okay. Then you probably know that if you go to another church, you're going to hear more about their founder than you will about Christ. At least that was my experience. You see.
What do you know? What? Sorry, Kyle. Go ahead. I was going to ask what branch? What denominational? I know the
she's Protestant structure.
So Mary Baker Eddy.
Mary Baker Eddy's. Yeah. Now I got to say, the Christian Scientists saved my life. Their prayers are effective. Okay. They believe that prayer can cure all things, and they don't even go to doctors. They actually live out their faith. Okay. So I'm really impressed with these guys. And they saved my life. I'm going to say nothing against them, but it wasn't enough for me. It wasn't satisfying for me. So here's what happened. Imagine you're on death row and you're condemned to die, and a messenger comes by and says, "By the way, the governor has pardoned you. You are an immortal being. You will never die." You'd be over the moon with glee. You would go, "Wow, that's great." They let you out of prison, and they say, "By the way, we didn't tell you that, but your father is Caesar. You are the son of you are a prince. You are the son of the ruler of everything." You'd go, "Wow, I'm not just a free man. I'm a prince. I am the son of God. What a great thing." I want to go worship now because that's what that's the way a son should obey his father. So you run down the street and there's a crossroads and there's a guy at the crossroads. And they say, and then you go, where's the church? And they say, some people say the church is that way, and some people say the church is that way, and some people say it's both ways. And you say, what? And they say, your parents, the king and queen, they've got a divorce 400 years ago. They're not talking to each other anymore. You have to pick which one you want to live with, your dad or your mom. And I'm like, you Christians, you are such creeps. How dare you? I go to all the trouble of converting, and you guys quarrel, and you can't keep it together. You can't forgive each other. You both worship the Prince of Peace, and you guys can't stick to your guns. You can't stick together. I said, good gravy. This is like joining up for a war. And that's just assume the guy at the crossroads says, oh yeah, this is not a pleasure cruise. This is a worship. People are going to hate you. People you've never met are going to hate you. Yeah. I said, no, I'm a nice guy. That's not going to. He said, yes, they're going to hate you. And he said, sign on the dotted line. So I signed on the dotted line. Yes, I signed up for Christianity, and I lost 6 Hugo Awards because of it. Because I'm a Christian. Wow. Because the Hugo guys don't like conservatives. They don't like Christians. They don't like me. So, and it's the science fiction community. It was the community that was my heart and soul for so many years. So, but I did not have any supernatural powers leading me to Catholicism. I had to rely on my own poor, sad human wisdom. And I just told you a story about how my human wisdom was wrong for
right.
35 years. I didn't want to relitigate the Council of Trent. Okay, I didn't want to have to go through all the rigmarole. But I just looked at what the claims were, and the claim of the Catholic Church is different from the claim of the Protestant churches. You see, they're making a fundamentally different claim because the Catholic Church claims to be guided by the Holy Spirit, instituted by Christ, protected by God, and the bride of Christ, and supernatural, that it exists both now and in heaven. And the Protestant church's basic claim, there's different churches that make a slightly different claim, but their basic claim is that the early Christians were cromulent, and then the Catholics did something bad, and then Constantine rewrote the Bible, or something, and that you only need the scriptures, you only need the book written by the Catholics to be a good Christian. And the argument between the quarrel between the two of you seems to me, I recognized it. I recognized everything the Protestants say against the Catholics as being the same things I used to say as an atheist against the Christians. You see? Mm-hmm. So the question comes down to it is, if Christ is what he says he was, then you've got to be a Christian. Either that or you have to side with the devil and declare war on him. Okay? Because if Christ is what he says he is, then he's Lord. He's the creator of the universe. If the church is what she says she is, then you've got to be a Catholic because she's the one true apostolic and Catholic church. She's the universal church. And if she's not what she says she is, then she's the whore of Babylon. Then you've got to take up arms against her. Okay. Now, if you're going to take up arms against her, what part of her teachings are you going to accept as true? You would not even know Christ existed if it weren't for the church. So how can you be a Christian? Who would have told you about the Christianity? Josephus? I mean, where would you get your information from?
Right.
You're dealing with a message from a king. He walked on the earth. He told people the message, and they passed it down from generation to generation to you. But a second messenger comes up and says, "Oh no, the first message has been corrupted. The messenger changed the wording, and I've got the real message." Well, I go, "Well, where did you get the real message from?" Well, if you're a Mormon, then you say, "Well, Joseph Smith got the message on golden tablets in the 1800s." Right. That there was Christ, then a long dry spell where nothing of any importance happened, and then Joseph Smith. And I say, okay, well, show me the golden tablets. Oh, well, we don't have the golden tablets at hand. Right. I say, okay, well, or if you're a Muslim, the Muslim comes down and says, the prophet of God told me the original Bible is wrong, and that the Bible is our Quran, our recitals, and you can tell they're holy because they're so well written. They're so poetical. And I said, well, I don't speak Arabic. Did your prophet perform any miracles to show that he spoke with the will and authority? Does he have signs following? Does he show that he has the authority of God? And they say, no, but you can have multiple wives and you can't drink wine. And I said, well, that sounds like the Mormons. I mean, are you sure about that wine stuff and about the women stuff, the multiple wives thing? Now, in all fairness, if Muhammad was cutting them down from having 100 wives to having only 4, that's not a bad.
That's a step in the right direction.
Step in the right direction.
Yeah.
But the prophet is supposed to agree with what the previous prophets have said in order to be a prophet. Mary Baker Eddy, I actually have great respect for, because unlike Muhammad and unlike Joseph Smith, she did perform miracles. She cured the sick with her prayers. Okay,
I mean,
it happened. It's recorded.
I mean, like, you're kind of a product of that tradition as well, you know.
No, I'm not. My wife's a Christian Scientist.
Well, I mean, like, you know, you've benefited from those exact miracles.
Yes, I've benefited from one of those miracles. I can't doubt it. It would be irrational to point it out. Nor do I believe God fails to answer prayers prayed outside the church. I'm sorry, but he does answer prayers. He's nicer than we think he is.
Yes.
You know. But
And
if I'm gonna be a Christian, I'd like to be a member of the same church as Robin Hood and King Arthur. You see? Because then I get the benefit of 2,000 years of tradition, and I don't have this big blank spot in my mind between Martin Luther and the death of St. John the Apostle. You see? That for most Protestants, that's just a blank period where nothing of any particular significance happens. And why are you walking into a church and tearing down the candles and the statues which you object to, and smashing the stained glass windows which you object to, and then seizing the book on the Ambion and saying, "Oh no, this is real. Everything else is fake. This is real. This book that you guys wrote." And I say, well, why isn't the Shepherd of Hermas in that book? Who decided not to put in the Gospel of Thomas? Why is the letter of St. John in the book, but not the letter of St. Clement? Who decided that? Whose authority are you accepting that book on? The Catholic Church. Now, and the final argument for me was, I asked my Protestant friends, tell me the date after which the thing was too corrupt to be irrecoverable. Right. Tell me the date. What was it? 500 AD? Was it when Constantine took over? 300 AD? 200? I could not get a straight answer from them, because every date they said was after adoration of Mary, the real presence of the Eucharist. Every date they would give me was after the church already had a traditional established understanding that was fundamentally Catholic, except for one guy, and he was a Mormon. Now, I got to say,
That's what I was about to say.
Every Mormon I've ever met is a right guy. They're stand-up people. They're honest. They're good Christians, but their belief system is wacky. I can respect them, but I can't respect what their beliefs are. It looks to me like it was just a fraud. Yeah. I mean, an obvious fraud. I don't think that about Mary Baker Eddy. I don't think she was a shyster. But Joseph Smith, I'm sorry, he used seeing stones to find hidden treasures. And whenever the treasures were about to be dug up, he said, "Oh no, the spirits have carried them away." That was before he found these gold tablets.
Right. I got this new secret revelation, but you're totally not allowed to see it.
Yeah. It's and a friend of mine, a very close friend too, a Mormon, asked me to read the Book of Mormon, and I tried my darndest to get through it. But it was, excuse me, I'm doing the very thing I just criticized the Christians for doing, which is brothers arguing against brothers in public. I will privately say what my reservations about Mormonism are, but otherwise they're right guys. They knew when to leave the Boy Scouts, for example, and you know, they were quicker to be more pious than some of my guys. I wish our church had elders wandering around. Their young men go out and proselytize, all of them. Okay, everyone in the church goes out. If we did that, and because there's millions of us, can you imagine if we had nuns on every street corner telling people to save their souls? There's a lot of stuff that the Catholics can learn from the people who broke away from us, and maybe they're a little right to be a little cheesed off at us because we're not living up to the standards. We're bad Catholics. I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah. You know, everything that's good, true, and beautiful belongs to God. So if somebody else is doing something that's good, true, and beautiful, that's compatible with what we're doing. So
I feel that way about the pagans. When I go back and look at what Socrates said and what Aristotle said about the good or the divine beings, that looks to me like they were as close to God as you could get without revelation.
Yes.
And it's not enough, by the way.
Right.
I feel that way about the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire looks to me like it was the greatest, best civilization you could get without God. And it had pederasty and gladiatorial games and death by torture. But they had good roads. They had aqueducts. I mean, that's as good as you can get through man. and it's
Right.
not good enough.
Yeah.
It's
Dominion
not
by Tom Holland.
Dominion by Yeah, I was literally about to say Dominion. There's
I saw that.
what
What
you're
is that?
saying is you
have you
have
not
to
read
read
it?
Dominion by Tom Holland. Oh,
Ooh.
I didn't realize there was going to be a homework assignment if I did this interview.
Oh, boy, I'm sorry.
it's not a homework assignment. We are recommending to you a history book written as a novel that will make you cry.
I
It's
might
not
have read
like
that.
I'm not saying
no.
it's
I
not
might
saying
have read that. Does it have a picture?
I'm not saying it's written.
Does it have a picture of an upraised sword with a winged sword on the front? I might have.
No,
read that.
it's Salvador Dali's crucifix as the cover art for it.
Okay.
I'm not saying like it's written as a novel. I'm saying like
You're saying it's well written.
it's nonfiction. The
I'm
cadence of it is a novel. Yeah, the cadence of it is as if it were a novel. And I mean it's a history book, so I'm not gonna like give a spoiler warning for it. But the style of the book
I will
is.
give the spoiler warning. History is a long series of defeats leading into ultimately into a happy ending. I know that from reading Tolkien. Did I mention why it was the Christians seem so wise to me compared to how childish the atheists sound when they talk? So go ahead.
Why? Well, okay, so real quick, Tom Holland set out to write a book about how the West was founded fundamentally by Romans, and then Christians came along and ruined it. And he went, "Oh crap, it's the opposite. The West was founded fundamentally by Christians, like saving it from the godlessness and evil that was paganism."
Yes. Yep.
But the way he writes this book is over and over again.
If I may interrupt, Edward Gibbon, call your office, because that was Gibbon's theory. He didn't.
Mm-hmm.
He just wasn't bold enough to say it outright.
Right.
So, go ahead.
So the way he writes this is he proposes these like societal conflicts, these like society level conflicts that are being waged by great men, starting all the way back with the Persians, and how the Jews and the Israelites, or the Israelites rather, I'd like to say the Israelites, fought against it. And then he does the same thing over and over all the way up through the Christian era. He's like, well, then there was this heresy or this debate, and then the church came in and settled it. And there was this heresy and this debate, and then the church came in and settled it. And then you get to Luther. And because you're so far into this book, what the part of your brain following the story is telling you is this will be another triumph, right? There will be this moment that seems like it can't be solved, and then society and Christendom will band together and will reunite, and it'll be beautiful.
Right.
But as a person living in reality, you know that it doesn't, and it is
unhappy ending.
One of the saddest I've ever been reading a book, because you realize that you realize that it could. It's one of the first times I ever noticed that the Protestant Revolution truly could have been solved, but it just wasn't, due to like a few small things. Like you just realize how it snowballed, and it is. So I say that it's amazing, and I say it's a history written as a novel, because you feel the story happening and you want the story to keep happening, but then it's broken, and it is heartbreaking.
I read Gone with the Wind. I thought Red and Scarlet should have stuck together, but they get divorced at the end. So,
how dare you spoil Gone with the Wind?
It's sad. It's because my competition and my writing competition, as she says, sold more books than me.
Right. Yes.
You remind me of one other reason why I became a Catholic. I read a book by Alphonse Ligari, who's a saint, that was the history of heresies and their refutations. And he breaks it down by century. First century heresies, second century heresies. The most fun are the first and second century heresies, just by the way, because they're the Gnostics, and those guys are wacko. Those guys are crazy. Okay. I have kind of a pet peeve about Gnostics, because Gnosticism has reinvented itself in the modern age in a secular form called Marxism, or cultural Marxism, also known as feminism, also known as witchcraft. If you were not aware that feminists are witches, then I can instruct you.
Sorry, Kyle. Can I do it?
Yeah, go for it.
Pints with Aquinas has an episode on this very subject with Mary. I can't think of her last name. Crap.
It's not Mary Crap. That's a terrible pen name.
No, I'm sorry.
I do know who you're talking about, because I saw that episode after I became aware that there was a spirit table in the Smithsonian where Mary Wollstonecraft used to commune with the
Dr.
with the
Carrie
devil.
Grass.
I saw the episode, unless
Yeah.
it's one you've recorded and haven't broadcast yet.
No, it's out. Yeah, the
I'm a
Dr.
big
Carrie
fan.
Grass episode tackles this in full.
Excellent. Then you don't need me to tell you. I am a fan of Pipes with Aquinas because I'm a fan of Aquinas, but I'm a teetotaler, so I have to warn you, I'm one of the few Catholics who only takes wine when it's offered at communion, which they don't usually do because it's not the tradition.
Right.
So after reading Alfonso Lagarre, it looked to me when I got to his chapters on Luther, the Lutherans were a heretic that were just the same as all the previous heretics. They took one part of divine revelation, one part of scripture, exaggerated it, and used it as a weapon to batter down the other parts that were equally as dignified and equally as old. And it was an invention of man. And did Luther do even as many miracles as Mary Baker Eddy? And if not, why should I believe him? Was he merely using his human reason to deduce these things? That's not the process we agreed to. Every Lutheran I've ever met agrees with the findings of the Council of Chalcedon, agrees with the findings of the Nicene Council, agrees with the findings of the early church councils. They all recite the Nicene Creed.
Mm-hmm.
They all believe in the Trinity. The Trinity is not in the Bible. They all believe in monogamy. Monogamy is not in the Bible. Okay? They all believe in extra-biblical Christian teachings that they accept on the authority of the church. But not this one issue. You see? That was the other thing that did me in. Back when I was an atheist, I read a make-believe dialogue between Aquinas and Luther that someone had made up about arguing about church authority, about where the Bible comes from. And I had no dog in that fight as an atheist. To me, the Catholics and the Protestants at the time was like people who argued about whether or not Santa has 8 tiny reindeer or if you include Rudolph and it's 9. Okay, so between the 9 reindeer guys and the 8 reindeer guys, I didn't care because they were talking what I thought was about a superstitious nonsense. Mm-hmm. But the side argument, the Catholic side, clearly won the argument on logic. Logically, you can't say that the scriptures authorized by the church only are known to be holy because of the testament of the church, and the church is not reliable for anything else. Only when it writes it down does it become real. Everything else the church teaches is not real. That's not a logical thing. If the church is a holy book, can't come out of an unholy church. Okay, if the president signs a document, let's say the governor signs a commutation of sentence and gets a guy off death row. If the guy's not the governor, he can't write the document. You don't get off death row. The piece of paper doesn't have the authority. You see? Right. Now, after I became Christian, I looked up that dialogue again. I said, well, who wrote that? It was Peter Kreeft. Peter Kreeft wrote just a little article online. I don't know where it is again. I'd have to find it again. About a make-believe argument between, in one of his dialogues, he likes Socratic dialogues. It's one of his shticks. It's one of his strong points. So, the other thing that happened is a Protestant friend of mine told me in all earnestness, she said, don't read the early church fathers. I said, what? She said, don't read them. Don't read those guys. They'll lead you astray. And at that point I said, okay, this is a heresy. This is not legitimate. The word heresy is really a harsh word, but I don't know how else to explain the rather complicated concept of you take some parts of a document. You can have heresy, you can have political heresy. If you read the Constitution and you say, I believe in the First Amendment so that I believe pornography should be licit, but I don't believe in the Second Amendment, I don't think you should own a gun. That's a heresy because the document has both things in it. Does that make sense? If you believe in the Constitution and you say the U.S. government had no authority to rebel from England, that was an unlawful rebellion. Mm-hmm. You can't say the Constitution has authority that the Constitutional Congress doesn't have, that the states don't have the authority to ratify it. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So it is with me and my Lutheran friends. Now, I was raised Lutheran. The first 7 years of my life, I was Lutheran. I have great affection for them, but I think that I don't think they're any different from Monophysites or any other early heresy where they just made up something. The Collyridians are my favorite early heresy. Do you know what the Collyridians are?
I use those guys all the time.
Enough said. For your viewers, the Collyridians are people who worshipped Mary and committed sacrifices to her and were anathematized. They were expelled from the church. Yep. So the next time a Protestant says you worship Mary, you can say back, sorry, Protestant, but that is unlawful in my church, and you will be expelled if you do it.
Right.
So why would we be secretly worshiping Mary when we actually make it illegal to do so? Because here's the other problem. When you say worship, define your terms. I'm a philosopher. Define your terms for me. Worship is an act of sacrifice. The Mass is a sacrifice. The Mass is a sacrifice to God, the tripartite God. Mm-hmm. Mary is not sacrificed to during the Mass. She's hardly even mentioned. Okay? Those are private devotionals of you talking to a friend of yours who's going to pray for you. If it is unlawful to ask a person to pray for you, then you can't ask your pastor to pray for you either. You can't have a prayer circle. Okay, yeah. I'm sorry. Your objections are just irrational. So
yeah, my prayer circle has people who had their heads cut off and kept preaching in it. So my prayer circle is cooler than yours, Protestants.
Yeah, that's what I told my witch friends.
Owned. Catholicism proved.
At the time when I converted, I was living with my friend Bill the Witch, and he has a coven of witches, and I knew more witches than I knew Christians. You see. And after I converted, I tried to. Oh, and he's one of the guys who persuaded me to become a Christian, because I sat there and I asked him a few questions like, "Do you believe in life after death? Where do the rules of morality come from? Do the gods have a nature, and where does it come from? Are the gods part of nature or the supernatural, and so on and so forth?" Mm-hmm. And he could not answer any of those questions coherently. Maybe he believes in reincarnation, maybe not. Maybe he thought the gods are an energy field like the Force in Star Wars, maybe not.
It's a thread now, actually.
It's a thread now, yeah.
That's non-canonical. We have anathematized that. It is non-canonical. That is
Listen, it doesn't matter how much
fiction.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't matter how much money you pay. Your fan fiction is still fan fiction.
Your fan fiction is still fan fiction. Yes.
Yeah.
And by the way, some fan fiction is actually really good. This is not fan fiction is not a good term for it. It is ego fiction. It is graffiti. It is graffiti. It is taking the Mona Lisa and painting a mustache and glasses on her.
Ooh.
Okay.
This interview's not going to be long enough.
How you said we could go longer?
I mean, yeah, we can go as long as you want. I'm just saying, it doesn't matter how much time we spend. It's not going to be enough.
You guys haven't asked me any questions yet. It's just been me talking my face.
No,
it's 5 minutes without taking a breath. But I want to finish my story real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So my witch friend says my witch friend doesn't know anything about his own religion, and I said to myself, now keep in mind, as an atheist, I was a vituperative, evangelizing atheist. I actually talked people out of believing in God. I did it 3 times. Fortunately, through God's grace, 2 of those guys changed their mind later and came back. One of the guys I might have accidentally condemned to hell. Thank you very much. So when he says he doesn't know anything about his own religion, I said even an illiterate plowman in the Middle Ages knew more about the theory and doctrine of the Trinitarianism than you know about your religion. And so my contempt for Christians, which had been rock bottom, absolute zero, now went up by 1 increment. They weren't the most despicable people on the planet because there was someone who thought less about religion than they did. So my friend Bill the Witch, I said to him when I became Christian, his wife didn't like me. You know, she kind of was displeased with me for that. And I said, "Listen, Bill, it's a very simple thing. Our magic is stronger than your magic. Our church bells can drive back your demons. We can heal the sick better than your mumbo jumbo. Our preachers, the name of Jesus can cast out the spirits you summon up from the vasty deep. I'm sorry, you're second rate. Why would I go with you? You know." And I have some alt-right friends who are racist, and though they won't say so, but they're not politically mainstream. And they say, no, you have to join our collective. We're collectivists, so you have to join our collective and become one with our group because the other group is attacking us. And I said, I already got a gang. It's called the Catholic Church. I got a team, okay? And it embraces all mankind. It's universal. So my team is bigger than your team. So I'm not gonna be, if I'm gonna be a collectivist, I've already got a collective, okay? So you guys are second rate. And King Arthur and Robin Hood are on my side there.
King Arthur and Robin Hood I love that argument. I'm stealing that.
That's why the Greek Orthodox had to me an argument equally profound with the Catholics. I could not find any rational reason to choose between the 2 of them. So my final decision was the one decision I've ever made in my life that was not based on pure logic. I couldn't decide between them because they both had a legitimate legal claim to being the original church, the original unified church, right? And they excommunicated each other because you Christians can't get along with each other. And I said, okay, I'm sorry, I'm a man of the West. These are my guys. I wouldn't be able to. When I visited Peking to adopt my daughter, I asked my tour guide where I could go to a Catholic church, and he told me where one was. And I said, atheism is the official church in Red China. I'm surprised Christianity is even legal. Does he know the difference between Catholic and Protestant? Does he know where he's sending me? So I walked to the church. I'm not able to read the road signs because I'm in a foreign country. I'm not able to talk to people because I don't speak Chinese. So I walk inside, and there's Mother Mary and Father Joseph and the crucifix, and I couldn't speak a word of the ritual, but I knew what the steps were because they were doing it in the same order. Okay, but the difference was the Chinese, the old people go up to take communion first, not who's ever in the front row, because they respect the elderly. So I walk out of the church having taken communion and feel really good about myself, and I walk into a Starbucks to get a cup of coffee, and there was a guy there, a Pole, who had been in that same service, and he spoke English, and he's, oh yeah, it's amazing. And I said, it's amazing to me that the Catholic Church is so big that we have tentacles in every country. There's not any other institution that is so widespread and so all pervasive. And the guy said, we're in a Starbucks.
Oh, don't get me going. Don't you dare do it. Kyle doesn't want me going on that topic. Not Starbucks, but the other one.
Not Starbucks today.
So, no, it's not Starbucks. Sorry.
I wanted to join a big church, and the Catholic Church is almost as big as McDonald's. So
almost as big as okay.
Well, they've served billions and billions. We've only served all mankind. So
nice. Okay. Wow.
It's been an hour, and I have hardly even begun. If you guys can stay longer, if you want to ask me any questions about my science fiction life or anything else, I'm open to questions. I love questions.
Oh, yeah.
If anyone on your chat has a tough zinger question for me.
Oh, so Father Jeremiah Hahn, he's in the chat here, and let me see here. He had a comment here. He said, one of my favorite topics on Mr. Wright's blog is his 7-fold step by step walkthrough of philosophical errors like anti-philosophy in modernity. Ask him about it. They ape ethics, metaphysics, etc. So is that any of that clicking with you?
I'm not sure what he's talking about. I did write an article called The Problem of Piffle once, where I set out what the 7 basic problems are with atheism. Because it's my proposition is that the problem of pain, the problem of why a benevolent God would allow evil to a foothold in the world, I think is a sincere problem. I think a Christian has to stand ready with some sort of answer for that, because that is a deep puzzle, and I think it's deeply troubling, especially if you're talking to someone who's had a child die or suffered some other tragedy. So the problem of pain, I think, is a real problem that Christians have to address. But the atheists have the problem of piffle, which is many problems, any one of which would be fatal to their argument, which they have to address. On metaphysics, they have to explain why there's something rather than nothing. They don't have an argument for that. It doesn't exist in the model of the universe. On ethics, they have to explain why ethics exist at all. If all ethics are subjective, then I don't have any moral obligation to be ethical. If all moral obligations are subjective, I don't have a moral obligation to have moral obligations, right? Okay. In aesthetics, why is there beauty? We can answer that question. They can't. Why are the stars beautiful? There's absolutely no Darwinian reason why the human brain should evolve to find stars to be beautiful at night or awe-inspiring. They're not bright enough to help us see by. They don't help us escape from lions. They don't produce food. They didn't do any of the things that Darwin would select for. Okay. The question of the political order becomes highly dubious. In the atheist worldview, there's no way all men are created equal. If there's no creation, then all men are not created equal. If they're not endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, then those rights are alienable. If there's no law above human law, okay, then human law can change as suits itself. If your rights are derived from the government can take them away. If your rights are derived by nature, then human nature can be changed by genetics. Right?
Yeah.
Because nature is something humans can control once you understand the secrets of science.
Does that make sense? If they're derived from the consent of the collective, then the collective can take them away as well.
Correct. Now, are all atheists going to agree with these conclusions? Because if they're but let me tell you why I call this problem of piffle. On a metaphysical basis, their metaphysics is piffle. I've had people say to me, all philosophy has been solved by science. Empirical science solves all questions. And I say back, I don't believe empirical science solves all questions. Tell me the experiment I can perform so that with my own eyes, I can see that empirical science solves all questions, and then it will be knowledge. Otherwise, your conclusion is not knowledge, because you just told me all knowledge was empirical. Okay? That means knowledge is piffle. That means knowledge doesn't mean anything in the atheist worldview. Okay? What is your assurance that the pictures in your brain and the pictures in the world outside are coherent with each other? What makes you think that you think? What makes you think your reason is reasonable? If you were not created by a rational being, and if your reason is not an instrument designed for the purpose of being reasonable, if it came about by accident, unintentionally, then how can you say it's designed for a purpose? If it's not designed for a purpose, then why is it reasonable? If it is reasonable, then why do you rely on it? I mean, where's you see? So reason is piffle to them. A equals A is not a rule that they can uphold. They can't uphold the laws of logic because they don't know where they come from. They're not material. They're not something you can measure. They're not something you can see with your eye. You can't time them with a stopwatch. How long does 2 + 2 = 4 last with a stopwatch? How do you measure with a yardstick? Okay, so you don't have science if you're an atheist, because science is based on certain assumptions about the nature of knowledge and the nature of reality that you can't use science to prove. Those are metaphysical assumptions. That reality is coherent and there's a substance and there's an underlying law of nature. Those are assumptions that science can't prove. That the human reason can understand the reason of nature. If there's no God, then why is nature reasonable? Why is it rational? Why is it understandable? Why do the rules of math happen to track the motions of the stars and planets? Okay. If there's no God, why is there beauty? I mean, not why are you attracted to women? That could be explained maybe evolutionarily. But why are you attracted to music? Why do humans make music and no other animal does? I'm not talking about bird calls. I'm talking about actual music. Mathematically regular, perfect music. Why is that? Do you understand how much piffle you have? If you're an atheist, life has no meaning. It can't have a meaning, and you just make it up. Now, you can't get something from nothing. That's the fundamental premise of all philosophy. Nothing comes from nothing. You can't have an effect without a cause. And I don't care what modern physics says. If they say otherwise, then they're not doing science anymore. You can't have a science based on a principle that undermines the fundamental principle of science. So you can't have an effect without a cause. If you're an atheist, what is the cause that leads to the effect of the universe being created or the universe being sustained in case it turns out to be older than we think? Okay. If all of nature arose from the beginning of the universe, and the current model says the universe had a beginning point, a Big Bang, that model could be wrong, but let's just assume it's right. Then where does that come from? If all nature arises from the Big Bang, where does nature come from? It can't come from nature, but it has to have a cause, right? So it's got to have a supernatural cause. The supernatural cause, if cause and effect only starts when time starts, then what started cause and effect? There can't be a cause to cause and effect, not a mechanical cause. There has to be, but there has to be an intention. There has to be something willed it into existence, and so on. You see, the problem with being an atheist is your model doesn't explain why there are so many monotheists. Why is everyone crazy but you? And why did the crazy people invent the science that you are upholding as the reason you don't believe in the religion that they believe in? I'm sorry, Isaac Newton both discovered the 3 laws of motion and studied biblical prophecy. The Catholic Church was the one who created science because we stopped superstition.
Yeah.
You accuse us of being superstitious, but we're the only religion. Christendom is the only place on earth where witchcraft has ever been illegal. The Chinese emperors had court astrologers. They had court witches. They studied the occult. They tried to divine the future. You see? So I'm hoping that's what Dr. Hahn is talking about. What is he? Father Hahn? I don't know what he is.
Yeah, Father Hahn. He's actually a priest.
I hope that's what the father's talking about, but I'm not sure because it's not filed away in my filing cabinet of my mind under the words he used for.
Yeah, and he just confirmed. Yep, you nailed it. That's exactly what he was getting at. That's exactly what he was.
If you look on my blog, you can see a post called "The Problem of Piffle." Because if the atheists are right, life is meaningless and everything is piffle. Everything is just balderdash. Everything, including atheism. It's one of the things. It violates Wright's first rule of philosophy, which is if you believe in a universe where the philosopher cannot exist. Let's say you're a materialist and you think everyone's just a meat robot. Well, in that case, where did your belief that you're a meat robot come from? Was that belief programmed into you by Darwin? How do you know that if that belief doesn't reflect reality, then you're like the idiot gardener who has sawed off the branch of the tree that you're standing on to saw the branch off. I'm sorry. If you're if you believe that reality is subjective, then is that belief true, or is that just a subjective opinion?
Yeah. No, actually, now that Father John Brown is also in the chat, like I had him on my channel previously, and you kind of brought this up, like, why are the stars beautiful? Like, that doesn't seem to make any evolutionary sense.
Right.
And he actually said something similar on a previous appearance on my channel of like, what's the purpose of a flower?
Well, not just stars. I'll use a better example. Tigers. Tigers are dangerous to us. We should find them repulsive. For the same reason we find excrement repulsive, because it might contain germs that kill us. It might contain a danger. Why is there cemetery burning bright in the jungles of the night? You say,
yeah, that's not something that I'd ever considered before. That's really good. But we got another question here that I think is really excellent. So Alex Egbert asks, is there a non-axiomatic philosophy? And if so, is it interesting?
No, there's no non-axiomatic philosophy. It's like asking if there's a chain of reasoning with no first link.
Oh, well, that was easy. All right. And
now I will say, there are certain axioms which I regard as indubitable. I don't think you can coherently, logically doubt your own existence. I did meet a woman once who said that she did not exist. She said that her concept of self was merely a collection of thoughts with no property in common. And she was just a cloud of no. Hume was not as smart as this woman. Hume is the guy who said that all knowledge is empirical knowledge, and when you ask him to prove it empirically, he goes and plays backgammon.
Well, backgammon is fun. That's not his fault.
Hume writes his whole book to prove that his whole book shouldn't be written. He says, throw out every book that doesn't have empirical knowledge in it from your library, and his book would be the first to go. He's the philosopher who's the idiot gardener who undermines his own. No, this woman was much more. She's an ex-Catholic, and I was trying to talk her back into at least giving Christianity a chance. And she had been talked out of it by Udowski, by an internet quack who was a science fiction fan that I had a brush against with. He was a transhumanist at the time. He liked my science fiction books that had certain elements that he thought were transhumanism. And he didn't realize that I was preaching stoicism. I was actually saying the opposite of what he said. I don't think technology is going to save us from the heat death of the universe. I'm sorry. I don't think technology is going to make us immortal. It might extend our lifespans, even tremendously. Who knows? It might extend our lifespans by centuries. But I'm sorry. If the material universe is all that is in, then entropy wins in the end.
Yeah,
you're not going to reverse entropy, no matter what Isaac Asimov's short story says. This woman didn't believe in essence and accident. She did not believe that things had essential properties. She thought that words were merely conventions invented by men artificially that were untruthful. So that when you said the word forest, if you could not define every single tree that was in the forest, there was no facts to facts association in your mind. And I said, well, you're using words to express this idea to me. How do those work? I don't think you seem to realize that whenever you say a word, you're referring to a group of things that have some property in common. When I say man, I mean featherless biped, immortal son of God. I don't mean man and ape. I could use a word for that. There's a hominid. I could,
Right.
And if I say galaxy, I'm sorry, but I can tell the difference between the Andromeda Galaxy and the Milky Way Galaxy. It's not false to facts. It's not inaccurate to say the Milky Way is not Andromeda Galaxy. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But she didn't buy this. She didn't believe this. She thought herself, her thoughts, her memories, her being, since it changed over time, had no one property in common. Therefore, her her selfness, did not exist. It was merely as if you took a box and put in a potato, a rabbit, and a cup, and said, "Those are all things. Those are all things together. I'm going to call that by one name." Okay. She thought it was arbitrary. So she's the only person I've ever talked to who said that she herself did not exist. That is not a philosophically coherent belief system. Okay. If you don't believe in cause and effect, I think that is axiomatic. I think to not believe in cause and effect is in effect to say that you live in a chaos where events simply happen with no rhyme or reason to them. Okay. Even your own thoughts. If your thoughts are not directed to an end, there's no cause for them. why are you saying what you're saying now if the cause is not I believe it to be true, if you don't believe in cause and effect? Now, Hume did more damage than anyone else to philosophy because he eliminated discussion of the Aristotelian four causes. The problem is that Aristotle's four causes makes belief in God very difficult to avoid, but the belief that there's only efficient cause, what scientists refer to as cause, mechanical cause, historical cause, A leads to B leads to C. The problem is, if you believe in that, then you don't believe in mankind. You can't be a philosopher. You can't sit down and think about the universe if the thinking process is merely a mechanical brain molecular operation. You've probably heard C.S. Lewis make the same argument. Mm-hmm. If everything you're saying is just a phonograph record repeating what the needle picks up in the grooves and irregularities of the surface, then what you're saying is piffle, is meaningless, you say? Mm-hmm. Now, here's the problem. I'm a failed lawyer. If people thought like lawyers instead of thinking like scientists, would be a much more coherent and rational civilization around us. Here's why I say that. If you're in a murder trial and someone said, well, why did Peter strike Paul? You can say, well, he did it in order to, they were rivals for the same, they were both in love with the same woman, okay? Or whatever the reason was. If you say, why did Peter strike Paul? And your answer is, the nerve impulses of such and such a voltage activated the muscles of such and such a weight and mass and propelled his knuckles at such and such a vector into his face at this volume, at this velocity to produce this amount of kinetic energy. That's not an answer. That's not answering the question. That's like when the kid says, why must I go to bed now? And your answer is because I said so. Because I said so tells you the formal cause, but not the final cause. It's not actually answering the question as asked. Okay. So a lot of philosophy would be clarified if people would actually answer the question as asked. And here's what I mean by thinking like a lawyer. If you use a lawyerly approach, lawyers look for proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Mm-hmm. Philosophers since Descartes have been looking for proof that no one can possibly doubt, not even a crazy person. Do we really care about the doubts of crazy people? If Descartes actually thinks everyone around him, if a solipsist actually thinks everyone around him is an automaton, mm-hmm. then he belongs in a nut house, okay? Because A, who taught you the theory of solipsism, Mr. Solipsist? Was it an automaton? The language you're using to express these thoughts, who invented that language? Was it you or was it an automaton? You see the problem with solipsism? For those who don't know, solipsism is the theory that you don't know for sure that other consciousnesses exist because only empirical knowledge is true, and you can't have empirical knowledge of someone else's mind unless you're a telepath. Yeah. Okay? Now, no lawyer would make that argument. The lawyer would say, here is the evidence to show what his frame of mind was. He must have had malice aforethought, otherwise he would not have bought the gun before he went into the room to do the murder. That's a reasonable argument. That should persuade any 12 jurors, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, he's not trying to be a scientist who says, oh, the things only exist if I can measure it with a yardstick and time it with a pocket watch. Really? What about, are you in love with your wife, Mr. Scientist? How much does it weigh? How much does love weigh? Well, my brain atoms, is your belief in brain atoms caused by brain atoms? If I took a bone needle and injected it into the occipital lobe of your brain and found the brain atoms that make you believe that brain atoms cause all brain motions, would you stop believing that once that was done? And then could I inject you and make you a Democrat or a Republican?
Yeah. Alex, if I suddenly know Kung Fu, then I guess the solipsists are right.
It doesn't necessarily follow. You could know Kung Fu for some other reason. The space alien time travelers might have inserted into your brain. You could be living in the Matrix. You could just download it from the.
I was literally about to say that. You could be Neo. I know Kung Fu.
Yeah.
Yep.
I literally was about to quote that.
A nice movie. By the way, Dark City is better. I'm the only fan of Dark City that I know of, but it's if you want to do a Gnostic mythology, Dark City came out the same year. It was by Alex Proces, the guy who did The Raven. Basically the same premise. Your life is all an illusion. You're being deceived by the demiurge. You're being deceived by the great deceiver. But that also has a love story in it, and it doesn't have logical flaws in it. So.
Okay. Wow.
Don't get me wrong. I like The Matrix. I think The Matrix is good. The second one had many good fight scenes in it. The third one is go do your laundry instead. That's John Wright, film critic.
And the fourth one doesn't exist. The fourth one doesn't exist and cannot hurt you.
I didn't even remember the fourth one. The fourth one
It's like
is...
Brian Herbert. It's like Brian Herbert. He does not exist and cannot hurt me.
Yes.
Nice.
Right.
Okay, so I've kind of got like one final question before I hand it off to Thursday and like let him kind of pick your brain about some of your writing techniques. But on your blog, you've got this apologetic work about the Queen of Heaven versus the Queen of Babylon, and Queen of Babylon is spelt differently. Can you just like give us an overview of that?
The word "quen" there is a whore. It's an
Oh.
old English term.
Okay, good to know.
I didn't want to use the word whore Babylon on the apologetic. Basically, it's an apologetic about why I believe in the Catholic Church, and it goes through some of the arguments that I've just given you here now.
Sure.
Including a rather elaborate metaphor of if you're receiving two messengers from a distant king, and both messengers disagree with each other, and you say, "Well, first messenger, how long have you been in service to the king?" And he says, "I've walked 2,000 miles to bring this message from the king, who's 2,000 miles away." And the second messenger says, 400 miles, because he's only 400 years old. And the third messenger says, 100 years ago, I got them on golden tablets from 100 years ago. Then you go, well, where's your warrant? Show me your proof that you're from the king.
Right.
Show me that you're telling me the same things now as he said then. And here's the one that really gets me. This is the one that really gets my goat, messengers of various denominations. Is contraception illicit? If you say yes, then you are contradicting what your church taught before 1932. Okay? All the major Christian denominations condemned contraception as immoral, as morally problematical before 1932, before the Lambeth Conference, headed by the Anglicans, our friends the Anglicans. What about marriage? My dear friend Anglicans.
Mm-hmm.
When I read the Bible, after I converted, I read the Bible, and it is I'm sorry, Christians, it's a pack of riddles. You might think you know what it means, but it's very confusing. Jesus talks in parables. He is oracular. It is hard to find out. It's hard to figure out what he's saying. If you're trying to read the Bible by yourself, good luck. You have about as much chance of understanding what he says as you non-lawyers have of understanding some of the technical terminology in the in constitutional law. Okay, let me use that as an example because I'm a lawyer. High crimes and misdemeanors is a term of art. It has a specific meaning in the English common law. So if you're reading the Constitution and you think it's written in modern English, or if you think the Second Amendment means that only militias get guns,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't know that the word militia means every male over 16 and under 40 in the community, every healthy male in the community, and if you don't know that the word regulated in the 17th century means drilled, okay,
Mm-hmm.
it means practiced in arms, you're not reading the Constitution. Well, likewise, if you read the Bible and it's full of riddles, you can't read it without an interpreter. I'm sorry. Maybe the Holy Spirit can guide you, maybe not. If the Holy Spirit does guide you, then you should agree with your fellow Protestants as to what the confusing passages mean. But there's one passage that wasn't confusing when I read it. There's one thing Christ said that was absolutely unambiguous. You can't get divorced and remarried. There's no two ways about it. It's not a parable. It's not a metaphor. The church does not allow for divorce. Okay. So Anglicans, if Henry VIII was the defensor fidei, was the disciple of faith, then he can't change that rule. Even if you say he's the Pope of England from now on. I'm sorry, that's not a legitimate reason to break away. And my fellow Lutherans, even if Luther was right and the church had become corrupt, you should have been Reformationists, not start a new church. That's not the way it goes. We have a vote at a general council. You abide by the majority of the vote. The guys the Unitarians, when they lost to the Trinitarians in the 2nd century, there was the 4th century, there was a general church council. They had a vote. The bishops abided by the way that the bishops decided. So, and I forgot what the question was.
That's okay.
Now the Baptists have decided that the Nicene Creed is not to be accepted. I don't know if you saw that. That happened this week.
Oh.
Did you see that?
No, I mean, I knew it was up for debate. I didn't know that the decision had been reached.
I don't want to mock my fellow Christians, but one reason why I became a Catholic is because the other denominations looked like they were not guided by the Holy Spirit anymore. They just looked dead to me. They looked like they changed their minds. If your church follows the world, it's not the real church. The real church is hated by the world. So.
There's a good, I think it's an Arab proverb, proverb. My buddy, my friend Shane Smith said it to me. He told me it was an Arab proverb, and it's me and my brother against my cousin, me and my cousin against the world.
We're in the same foxhole with the faithful Jews and with the other Christian denominations.
Yes.
So
and
Haley,
we have to, and we before we criticize anyone, we have to get rid of the lavender mob that's running our Vatican. We have to get rid of the pederasts and the pedophiles and the
Frogatiane.
Yep. So Haley's got a question here about so I just want him to comment on nominalism. So some background, we've got a friend who's like a friend of the show. His name's Kevin, and he's the friendliest apostate you'll ever talk to. But like he's a hardcore nominalist. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
If nominalism were true, then words are arbitrary. If words are arbitrary, then Christ is not the word of God. The problem with nominalism is that if we decide what words mean and what they don't mean, then Orwell is right, and we should all speak newspeak. If words don't have an innate meaning independent of our desires, then you can't deduce ideas from other ideas. I should explain what nominalism is. Nominalism is the theory that words are arbitrary, that words are human selected in order to group together categories of things that don't have any innate essence to themselves. I forget what the opposite of nominalism is called. I think it's called realism. It's the belief that essences are real. And an essence, by the way, an essence is a thing that is the part of a thing that makes it a thing. The essence of a clock is that it tells time. So a clock and an egg timer, a sundial, or a water clock, or a timed candle, those have the same essence of their time telling devices, the clocks. The grouping can't be arbitrary because otherwise the word would have no meaning. You see, I've also heard many people who think that nominalism is the source of all of the confusions in the church that came later, all the philosophical nonsense that has sprung up. You remember I badmouthed the fourth year at St. John's because almost all the modern philosophers are just nonsensical. Mm-hmm. After the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation, philosophers did not try to bring in theology into their philosophy. They tried to ground their entire philosophy on nature and natural reason. Okay, and so you had people like Hume, who basically proved Hume doesn't exist. Then you had people like Kant, who was trying to argue against Hume by asserting that certain axiomatic beliefs that we have to have. He called them categories, but he didn't ground them in a logical proof. He was sort of self-referential. Then you have Hegel, who, as best I can tell, thanks to reading David Lindsay, I now am convinced Hegel was not a philosopher at all, but was a Wicca. Was an esoteric thinker along the lines of a Freemason or a Hermeticist or a Gnostic. That he was using philosophical language to express basically a Hermeticist Neoplatonist idea that all men were fragments of God who have to recombine into an absolute after the end of time. And Marx, is I don't know if you know, but Marx is the red-haired stepchild of Hegel. He takes Hegelian philosophy and makes a secular materialistic version of it. He actually says he's using the dialectic, the thinking process, the historical process of Hegel and making it material. Now, I am myself, I'm not sure if those errors go back to nominalism, but I've heard it said, but I can't speak of my own authority if that's the case or not. So I don't have much an opinion about nominalism, but I if I understand it, then it looks to me like it's one more of the philosophies that contradicts itself. If words don't have meaning, the sentence words don't have meaning, don't have meaning. And if the words are not grounded in reality, then they don't have meaning. They're man-made, then they're arbitrary. And if it's man-made, man can unmake them. Okay, that's not a satisfactory answer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
But
go ahead.
I may have misunderstood nominalism, so take that with a grain of salt. I'm not sure that's my final opinion.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well, Thursday, I know you've got some questions. I know we talked about it a little bit before the interview started, so I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'm going to drop off just for a little bit. I need to step away, but go ahead.
Okay. I'm in charge now.
Okay, first question. Is Thursday your real name, and are you a member of the Addams family? Because I know that Tuesday, Wednesday is your sister. Is that correct?
No.
No?
Thursday is not my real name.
Are you related? do you work for Robert Crusoe, or is your brother named Friday? His man Friday?
No.
No?
Little known fact: time travel will be invented before I die because the book "The Man Who Was Thursday" by G.K. Chesterton is actually based on me.
You're a
So-
member of the Supreme Anarchist Council? I put you in
Yeah.
one of my books, by the way.
Did you really? Which one? I have to read it. The Man Who Was Thursday is my favorite book, and so I had it as a gamer. The actual lore is I had it as my gamer tag for a really long time.
Sure.
And then when I moved to Stubenville, because it was my gamer tag, it was my username for everything. And when I met,
the book is Swan Knight Squire and Daughter of Danger. My Moth and Cobweb books. I've written 6 out of 12 of them. I put them on hold so I could write a Star Wars ripoff. But within those first 6 books, you will come across the Supreme Anarchist Council, and you will meet the man in the black room who hires the main character to be a member of the Last Crusade and gives him a badge.
There we go.
To fight the anarchists.
Well, if you want to do more.
Now, I don't have the same surprise ending as G.K. Chesterton. I'm not as smart as he is, though I do have his same weight.
Well, I don't want to totally go off what I told Kyle I'd talk to you about, or I would just talk to you about The Man Who Was Thursday for like an hour.
Brilliant book. Brilliant book.
But if you want to do that sometime, I have a streaming channel where I just talk about whatever I want, and most of the time I just play video games. So if you want to come hang out, you're welcome. Anyway, I'm stealing Kyle's guests, so we'll talk about what I told him I would talk about.
As you can see, I can talk for an hour without pausing for breath. I'd be happy to talk about The Man Who Was Thursday. It's a fascinating book. I'm not sure I understand the ending, but I love it enough that I put it in my books. He's in the public domain. I stole from him. The Supreme Anarchist Council shows up in my book.
It's beautiful.
Okay. But it's not It's not the same Supreme Anarchist Council.
I'll have to read it. A Swan Knight's Son. Yes. I'm looking at your. Okay. So I have a couple questions. I want to ask about Bias Cocklehat and Staff. It is my favorite short story I've ever read, but I will wait until after. Oh yeah.
That's surprising. Chesterton has much better stories than I do, and so does Gene Wolfe.
Well,
to each his
I don't
own.
think that. I'm a softy at heart and somewhat of a romantic. So when somebody writes a multi-dimensional love story, I'm want to fall for it wholeheartedly. But I will ask general questions first about writing, so that we can at the end say, spoiler alert, go read it, then come back. So I have 2 questions about the writing while you were converting. I think one is more interesting than the other, but I'll ask the first one is, so I'll say both of them and then I'll let you answer. How did your storytelling change before and after your conversion? How is that different? And then I think the more interesting question is whatever the book was you were working on at the time of your conversion, which I would guess was probably one of the Chronicles of Chaos based on the timeline. How did that change? Did that book change midway through writing it based on the conversion? Was there like things about it that changed? So I think that's the second one. I think is more interesting, but the first one is more general.
Here's the answer. It's a little complicated. First, my writing didn't change a bit because when I was an atheist, I did not try to preach atheism or preach anything when I'm writing a book. I'm trying to entertain the reader. Okay. I don't think it's a writer's place to write a lecture. I like Ayn Rand and I like Robert Heinlein, but both of them, when they're writing Atlas Shrugged or they're writing Starship Troopers, stop for lectures. And now, don't get me wrong. I like lectures. I go to lectures. I like hearing people's opinions and hearing rational arguments to try to support certain viewpoints. But that's not entertainment. That's not what the writer's supposed to do. So if you look at Orphans of Chaos, I will confirm, though maybe I shouldn't, that was the book I was working on in the middle of the conversion experience. You should not be able to detect any seam, any change between them, because I did not at that time think it was my mission in life to preach the gospel through my writing. There was one scene that I added. I was having trouble with what the relationship was between the Christ and these other immortal beings that secretly inhabit the universe. These are the godlike beings who've been worshipped as gods by the pagans. And I decided that it would be funny if I had one of them convert. But I thought, since they're immortal, and since I thought the Catholic Church at the time I was writing was ridiculous, that I should have them convert to an early heresy and claim that her church was the only real, original, universal, and apostolic church, and that the Catholics went off the rails. You see, so she was a Docetist from the 5th century.
Okay. Yeah.
But I had her. There's a story from Irish mythology from Irish lore, that St. Patrick was talking to a mermaid, and she came on shore and she asked to be saved. And he said, "You don't have an immortal soul. You can't be saved. You can't be baptized." And she said, "Are you sure?" Her name was Merrigan or something like that. And he said, "This walking stick in my hand will burst into leaves and flowers before it's possible for a mermaid to have a soul." And as he was done talking, it burst into leaves and flowers, and he looked at it with shock, and he baptized her, and she thanked him, and she dived back into the water. And I said, "That's my character. That's her. Was one of the teachers at the orphanage at the Orphans of Chaos." Okay. Now, after I converted, and it became known in the science fiction community that I had converted, so people rereading the stories that were written when I was an atheist ignored the many times I mock religion. I have an example where Colin goes outside and wrestles with a garden hose and claims to be having a religious experience that allows him to pick up snakes. And he pretends he's bitten and then shouts out that who would lie to a child? What a terrible thing. Okay. The preacher that the priest that the children have to go to once a week on chapel is held up as a ridiculous figure of fun. But since I was an honest author, the witch character is afraid of church bells. He's afraid of the church because he summons up spirits from the vasty deep, and so he knows that the Christian mojo will drive away his spirits, and he also knows he has to do it secretly. He says it's like dealing with the mafia. Okay, I put that in because that was honest to what the lore was, what the legend was. It's not, but someone found out later that I was a Christian and wrote a review and said, "This is like Narnia. This is Christian apologetics." And I was like, "Are you crazy? Are you guys so insane that you can't tell the difference between a book written by an atheist and a book written by a Christian?" So I kept to my philosophy that I should not use my books to preach for about 4 years. Then I got a tear-stained letter from a woman who had a child die about a story of mine in which a child dies and how it was treated. It was called "Yes, Virginia, There's a Santa Claus." It's about a child who dies on Christmas Eve, and she actually gets visited by St. Nicholas, the real St. Nicholas, the Archbishop of Turkey. And she sees certain other visions and so on and so forth. It was up for a Hugo Award, but they disannulled it because I was Christian. They disannulled it because they thought I was a Nazi. I'm not sure they actually hate me for being Christian, but they hated me for being not being woke. Okay. And I had so many fans that I actually filled up the roster for that short story category. So the only other stories I was competing against were other stories of mine because I had so many fans who liked me so much that year. And they thought I had done something untoward by getting on the roster that way, getting on the ballot that way. And I hadn't done it. I'd written like 2 posts. I hadn't hired anyone with money. They hired ringers with money to come in and join the WorldCon to get votes to vote me no award. So I was up for 6 Hugo Awards, which is more than any other person in history for one award, and all of them were disannulled. All of them were voted no award because I was just that terrible a writer. In any case, after I got that letter, and I said to myself, I have to preach. I got to preach now. I have to actually tell stories that have a clear Christian theme. It's going to creep into my work anyway. No matter what you do, your worldview creeps into your work because your worldview defines what you think of as reasonable and unreasonable. Now, that's not the same as getting preachy about it, but I do now deliberately put Christian elements into my story, Catholic elements into the stories, to try to portray to the readers some of the glamour and wonder and romance of Christianity. In my story, Somewhither, for example, the main character is a Catholic, and he finds out that he has this substance living in his bloodstream that can repair his bones and cells and from wounds if he's in the right frame of mind. And to get in the right frame of mind, he prays, because he thinks it's a miracle. Your author does not say whether his theory about what's going on is correct or incorrect, but I stop and have him pray before combat because it heals his wounds.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I was going to ask about losing Hugo Awards, but you kind of answered that. It seemed to be possibly political.
Not possibly. It was clearly and openly political. They said so at the time.
Okay.
Now they did this by accusing us of doing what they were doing, but I was very disappointed with my fellow science fiction fans. I thought that was just abominable.
Let me ask: when did the idea for Forbidden Thoughts come about? Whose idea was that, and how did you?
Milo Yiannopoulos is a flamboyantly, openly homosexual Catholic who says that homosexuality is wrong, who married a black man.
He's divorced him now.
Yes.
Yeah.
I worked for him for a little while on one of his online magazines. Great boss.
Okay.
I love the guy. And he was an irascible, ungaggable, unstoppable supporter of Donald Trump during his first run for office. And he said...
He did a tour. We won't say the name for Kyle's sake.
He did a what?
He did a tour for Trump during his first run. We won't say the college tour. Yeah. We won't say the name of the tour for Kyle's sake.
Oh, don't say it for my sake too. I'm trying to clean up my language that I don't like hearing.
Not the language, but not so much to clean it up, but just so YouTube doesn't grab him.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
Well, I've already used the word sodomite. Does that?
That's fine. Well, it's fine.
They probably think I'm pro rather than anti.
Hopefully.
In any case, he said he suddenly became wildly popular because all of the establishment decided to crucify him. And unfortunately, the right-wing establishment also sided with the left-wing establishment to help with the process, which was just highly embarrassing to our side. Although I serve Christ first, I do lean to the right in American politics. I believe in the Constitution. I'm a romantic. So he said, let's do a book, and he cast about for ideas. And he said he wanted to do a book about other. He wanted to do a book on topics that other people won't touch. So he asked me to produce a story, and I had an idea kicking around about how you might do a parallel time travel story. I'm really pleasantly surprised that you liked that story because it didn't quite live up to what I was hoping to do about it. If I had to rewrite it, I might have made it differently. But it wasn't as I didn't make it as clear as I could have that the woman from the world where the woman didn't get the vote was much happier than the woman from the world where she does get the vote.
Yeah.
Because that was the thought I was trying to say.
I think we're going to get into it now. So spoilers for anybody who hasn't read. The story is in the collection Forbidden Thoughts. The story is called By His Cockle Hat and Staff. Everybody should go read it.
Let me explain the title in case you don't recognize the reference. You know a pilgrim by his cockle hat and staff.
Yes.
So it's a reference to the pilgrimage. In this case, the pilgrimage is being made between two parallel timelines.
I do, one of my favorite things in literature is when the author is so confident in his ability to immerse you in his story that he tells you the end and it just knows you won't notice it. And you putting that poem, the poem for the opening is one of those things because, and we've already given the spoiler warning, but because the whole point of the end is that Francis Ward of the two timeline, or of the timeline where the women never got to vote, or rather Dice of the progressive timeline, recognizes in the pilgrim Liddy, who he thought was dead. I thought that was on purpose. Was that not on purpose?
I don't remember the story well enough to know what you're talking about. And the poem I picked for completely different reasons. That was not the.
Oh.
Are you sure you want to talk to an author about your favorite story? You don't seem to realize all I do as the author is plant the seed. You're the one who tills the soil. Your imagination is the one who tills the soil. And God makes the plant grow. The story you read is not the story I wrote, you see.
Okay. Well, so the end...
So
I guess I got it wrong.
Out of it, no, wrong. Didn't you hear what I just said?
Fair enough. I guess I got something out of it different than what you intended.
The story you're reading comes from the muse who comes from heaven. I am merely the mailman, I delivered a letter to you from God to your heart. And you say, mailman, what a great letter. I didn't write the letter. All I did was write it down.
Well, your humility is inspiring, but
It's not humility.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm telling it like it is. The reason why it was easy for me to convert to believing in God is because as an author, I already knew that ideas came to my head from outside.
Very
Now,
cool.
my friends tell me that's from my subconscious mind. And I said, I am not conscious of my subconscious mind. How do you know I have one? And what makes you think my subconscious mind is this smart that it can make complex symbolic parallels between the beginning and the end of a story and an overall structure that I did not have in mind? I did not, in my novel, The Golden Age, I did not know who the old man was in chapter 1 until he revealed his identity in chapter 50. That came as a surprise to me. It happened while I was typing the sentence. And then once it happened, I realized the clues were all there and it had to be that way.
That's fascinating. Well, so I recognized that it was the Pilgrim. You shall recognize a pilgrim by his cockle hat and staff.
Right.
After reading it a few times, I thought, and I went back and I read the full poem by Thomas Percy. The end of the poem is the woman who comes to the monastery, and the friar of Order Grey tells her that her beloved has died, and then at the end he reveals that he's her beloved, but he's taken on the mantle of the monastic life.
I never read the whole poem. That's amazing.
Okay. So
that seems to parallel my story very nicely.
Yeah, so I thought it was on purpose. I thought it was like, if you read this whole poem and then you read the story, it's fairly obvious where the story is going, because...
Never talk to an author that you really like, because he will just disabuse you. It's like going in and seeing how the sausage is made in your favorite kitchen. I had no idea that was in there. That's brilliant. That's great. So,
because Liddy is the pilgrim on pilgrimage to the holier place, the place with where love and respect and virtue is real.
Right.
And Dice is there searching for her, and he thinks she's dead, and then in the quote unquote friar Mary, he finds that she's been there all along. He's been looking at his beloved.
You're going to be so shocked, and I don't mean to disabuse you. I don't have any memory of what you're talking about. I don't recognize the events you're talking about.
Oh, okay. Well,
I haven't reread the story.
I also reread it this morning. So I reread it this morning.
Just assume I am an idiot savant. Okay. I don't know what goes into my stories or why they come out the way they do. Other authors are very accomplished. Other authors sit down and they train themselves to become good storytellers. I'm just a natural. Yeah. It's just a gift. It comes from God. It doesn't come from me.
Well, that's very fascinating, because I feel that way. I wonder now, because I've noticed this in others of my favorite books. I mean, one of my other favorite books, and I promise I won't do the whole thing on it, Kyle. One of my other favorite books is Dune, and I don't like the movies, and I promise I won't go into why. But one of my favorite things in Dune is there's this scene very near the beginning, right after the Duke dies, where Jessica and Paul are in the desert. And Paul has one of his first oracular visions, and he says that he's seen the logs of he's seen the records of the Bene Gesserit's breeding program.
Mm-hmm.
And only after reading the story and paying very close attention do you realize that at that moment Herbert has told you how the story ends, because the Bene Gesserit have power over the Emperor. It's been made very clear to that point, and it's also been made very clear that the Emperor doesn't like that. And so the only way Paul in the future could ever have read the logs is if he not only defeated the Bene Gesserit, but the only way to defeat the Bene Gesserit is if he was the Emperor.
Ah, that's very clever. That's very clever.
So Herbert is literally saying, like, less than a third of the way through the novel, it's going to end with Paul defeating the Bene Gesserit, being the Kwisatz Haderach, and being the Emperor.
He's not really the Kwisatz Haderach. Kwisatz Haderach is make-believe.
Right, well...
The story is about a false messiah.
It is. This is really... We could talk about this.
Instead of talking about it, I'll just say one thing. If you read Asimov's Foundations and you read Dude next to each other, you will see very curious parallels that Frank Herbert has a much more mature idea of human nature than Isaac Asimov does, because the people who are trying to control the future, the psychohistorians in the Trantor universe, are the Bene Gesserit in the Dune universe, and their plan blows up in their face because of love, because Lady Jessica decides to produce a son rather than a daughter. And by the way, Paul, during that same moment, if he saw the records, he also knows that he's related to the Harkonnens.
That's what he's saying. He's saying to Jessica, I am you to not like to you can't hate all Harkonnens because you and I are Harkonnens.
Right.
That's what that's the moment, is she's like talking about how she wants to wipe all Harkonnens out of existence, and he's saying,
yeah,
well, you can't.
Be careful what you wish for.
You can't.
Right.
You can't. Yeah. But it's those kind of things were very. Go ahead.
I just gonna say the psychohistory has always struck me as being a silly concept. I wrote a book that was my answer to Isaac Asimov, in addition to a number of other things I was trying to do in that book. But basically, I thought, aren't there any cowboys among the psychohistorians? Aren't there any guys who don't want to see the Second Empire rise up, that they prefer a republic, but they just want something else out of history than what the Selden has planned? Because the whole point of the Isaac Asimov series of short stories is that the Galactic Empire is falling; it's going into the Dark Ages, and instead of the Church preserving civilization, the mathematicians, the encyclopedists, are going to save civilization. But they have solved the problem of predicting history, and their predictive history is going to put the empire back on its feet again. And I was like, yeah, okay, but I'm an American. Who wants an emperor? I didn't vote for that. I didn't vote for the psychohistorian to decide my future, So I wrote a book called Count to a Trillion that has that as one of its themes.
That's one of the that's Dune Messiah and Children of Dune.
Yeah, Frank Herbert is just showing it's just blow up in your face.
Yeah.
Now, Frank Herbert is also a bit of a cynic, because I think he thinks that a hero is a guy who dies so early he doesn't live long enough to see his life works turn into garbage. Whereas Paul does. Paul just ends up dying in the desert as an outcast, if I recall correctly.
Well, spoilers
he pretends to.
He's the prophet.
Yeah, but but he's a prophet who's now prophesying against his own civilization. In any case, that's also a topic for another day. I haven't reread Dune in many a year, and I don't think Frank Herbert and I would agree on many political or philosophical ideas.
I doubt it. I think one of the most fascinating things about Dune is that Herbert clearly set out to write a book about how evil religion and power is, and he accidentally wrote a book about how cool religion is if it's in charge.
Yep. What I want to see is the sequel where the lensmen from Doc E. Smith come in to stop the Zwilniks, who are pushing drugs that they're getting from Planet Dune.
Yes.
So that would be a great fight. And the Borg. I want to see the Borg in the same fight, because the Bene Gesserits hate all computers made in human image, in like humanoids. Sorry, that's my alarm for praying the Angelus.
Okay. Well, that's really fascinating.
Which means we've been on for 2 hours. So, any other questions about now that you found out that my writing process is wait to be inspired by the muse, and then write 500 pages of notes to write a 200-page novel. Anything else you want to know about me?
Well, I was going to ask questions about things from the short story that aren't there, but it seems to me that you would have to not. Yeah. Okay. Well.
I assume that is a huge disappointment to you, and that will teach you better not to talk to authors about their work.
You think too highly of me. I don't learn.
I tossed it off in an afternoon. It didn't take me long.
Well, it's very good. I do really. I shouted it out on Pints actually a couple months ago. So
not only did I hear friends of mine told me about that, and they said, "Oh, you have to look at Pints of the Aquinas because they're talking about you." I said, "How can they be talking about me? I don't owe Matt Fratt any money." They said, no, they like your story. I say, great, which one? They said, there's something with the cockle and the hat. And I was, wait, what? Which one was that? So,
yeah, well.
I am very sorry that Milo got shoved out of the public eye, because he's one of the only homosexuals I know who publicly denounced homosexuality as not a valid way to live, and he did it because of his Catholic faith. I saw him go on a podcast with Lauren Chen, and she could not get over the fact that he believed in saints. The whole conversation centered around, how can you believe that there are dead people who sometimes can carry prayers to the Lord? And I was like, I was like, dang, man, is that what you're going to talk to him about? Read the Book of the Apocalypse. It says that the prayers of the saints go up to the Lord like incense from a burner. I mean, it's in there.
Yeah.
It's in the book. Okay, read the book. It's in the book. So, not that I want to mock my fellow Christians. Sorry, I'm again breaking my own rule. We Christians have to stick together like soldiers in a foxhole.
Wow.
In any case,
okay.
I do want to say one thing about my writing process. Part of my writing process is getting cheesed off at people who do a bad job. When I went to go see the Last Jedi, that was the last straw for me. And in fact, I wrote a book called The Last Straw, which is I originally meant it to be an article, and it turned into a diatribe that just went on and on and on as I was obsessively chewing the carpet like some comic opera villain about how bad this movie was, how insulting it was, how it was deliberately, maliciously graffiti on the whole Star Wars corpus. And I said, and I was in a car trip with my kids coming back from watching the movie. And I said, we could make up a better story than that, giving those same story elements. And so we had a conversation in the car for about an hour. We came up with what I thought was a brilliant story for what I would have done differently if George Lucas had hired me to write the sequel instead of asking Kathleen Kennedy to write the sequel. And as a joke on my blog, I wrote a review of that movie. And the review ended with me saying, somewhere nearby, there's a parallel timeline of more unhappy people, a darker timeline where they saw a movie much worse than this. That's just terrible. So fans wrote me, they said, oh, please write up this book. And I said, I'm in the middle of other projects right now. I haven't finished my Sunwither book. I haven't finished my Moth and Cobweb books. They said, no, please, we love Star Wars. Write the book. I said, okay, I'm sure I can write it quickly. I could not write it quickly. So I'm now on book 9 of a proposed 12-book series called Star Quest, which takes place in a galaxy far in the future and fairly close by, called Andromeda. It takes place in the real Andromeda galaxy. As a science fiction writer, I long ago made an oath never to make up any astronomical wonders, because real astronomy is so mind-bendingly wonderful that I can't imitate nature. It's just better than what I can make up, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There are things like there's a star that's like it's not that far away from us, astronomically speaking, that's going at like 8% of the speed of light, that has a comet tail of mass coming off of its burning atmosphere that's several light years long. Okay, that's a real thing. There's a star 50 light years away that the internal degenerate matter inside, because of the weight and mass, has become compressed carbon and turned into diamond. There's actually a diamond star 50 light years away from us. That's real. The Andromeda galaxy is on a collision course with us. It's going to ram into us in 3 billion years. It's barreling down on us. That's real. Okay, the two galaxies are going to collide. So, yeah, that's what I'm working on now. It's Star Quest. Basically, everything that Disney did wrong, I'm trying to do right. You know, I'm trying to make the.
I assume the series gets longer by the day at this rate.
No. I claim to work by inspiration, but this one I have an outline for. I also had an outline for Lost on the Last Continent, in the rather tight outline. Excuse me, that outline broke. I write three ways. Either I don't make an outline, write the whole thing at one go, like Golden Age. I write a very complicated outline and I stick to it, like Superluminary. I don't know if you ever read that book of mine. Or I have an outline and then I throw it out the window halfway through. and try to come up with something else, and that was Lost on the Last Continent. So, wow, which has I think the longest running fight scene I've ever written. If you like fight scenes, then you'll like some of my other work.
Awesome. Okay, what is your favorite novel then?
My favorite novel is Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien.
Okay, that's an epic.
It's the one I've reread the most often, and it forms a major part of my imaginative life. I would then say the Gene Wolfe books. I don't remember what the name is for. It's a set of interconnected trilogies, starting with Shadow of the Torturer. So the Shadow of the Torturer by Gene Wolfe, I would say, was next best. I can't really recommend Gene Wolfe to the uninitiated because he's a very difficult, crabby writer to read. But he's brilliant beyond brilliance when he's at his best.
Are you talking about? I'm looking it up. Are you talking about the Book of the New Sun? Is that the one?
Yes, Book of the New Sun.
Okay.
But the Book of the New Sun, he also wrote the Long Sun books, 4 of them that take place in the same background universe.
Interesting.
And that one,
Short Sun.
And that one also has a sequel trilogy called the Books of the Short Sun.
Yeah.
The Books of the Long Sun take place on a world that is an O'Neill colony, a spaceship that's an asteroid hollowed out and spun for gravity. And the pagan gods there are computer mainframe creatures where your brain information has been downloaded into a computer to make you immortal. And so they worship the emperor and his family, who made copies of themselves in the mainframe. But the main character in chapter 1 has a religious experience from an outside god, a god from the universe the universe of the stars that are somehow underfoot beneath the hull that they never see, the outsider god. See,
very interesting.
Oh, it's fascinating. It's if you want to see someone's meditation on what it must have been like to be a pagan at the time of the Roman Empire and to convert to Christianity, you could do worse. And the Books of the Short Sun are even better. They're the colonists after they land, and they have to deal with the planet is haunted by the previous civilization, and the main character can sometimes see the neighbors, as they're called, the ghosts of the previous peoples. And there's also space vampires. You can't do worse than that.
That's awesome.
But if you want to read a short story by Gene Wolfe, read Fifth Head of Kerberos. That will sum up some of his best and worst in one go. And if you're a Catholic, you'll see some very Catholic flavoring elements in it. So those are my favorite books. I also am a big fan of Keith Laumer, a big fan of Jack Vance, and a big fan of A.E. Van Vogt. In fact, I actually wrote a sequel with the widow's permission of an A.E. Van Vogt story called Null Continuum, which was a sequel to his World of Null and Players of Null books.
Awesome. That's very cool.
And I wrote a Jack Vance short story for a Jack Vance anthology that was put together by a guy who later said I was a terrible writer because he had to politically.
Well, such is life.
George R. R. Martin was the editor of one of the 2 editors of that book, and then after the Sad Puppies debacle, after I was disannulled out of my Hugo Awards, he publicly had to say that the Hugos were correct and that none of my stories were worth an award, even though he had bought one of my stories for his anthology. Okay, whatever, George. Thank you very much. Thank you for your service to the community.
Wow. He's also the guy who said that Aragorn is a bad person because he goes and commits a genocide against the orcs after Lord of the Rings.
That's not canonical. The orcs all die because the spirit of Sauron leaves them. They flee out into the wilderness. He doesn't commit a genocide. And besides, the orcs.
Let's not let reality get in the way of a good Catholic bash.
You can't commit a genocide against orcs unless you also kill off the elves because they're the same race.
They are. That's
true. The orcs are Gollum. The same way Gollum is of the same race as Frodo. Gollum is just a degenerate hobbit. The ringwraiths are just degenerate men. The orcs are degenerate elves.
Yeah.
There's no degenerate dwarves though.
Yeah.
Well,
because isn't that this is weird. Tolkien. This is weird Tolkien lore questions now. I guess I could probably ask Dr. Reinhardt. I think that might be because they weren't actually created by God. They were created by one of the angels.
It's possible, but God breathed the spirit into him. Aule, the blacksmith angel, created them. But they also were hard to corrupt. The only thing that the Dark Lord could do is make them lust after gold more. So they had like the benefit and the detriment of being rather materialistic, pragmatic people. They couldn't become wizards, but they couldn't become corrupt either. If you see what I'm saying, he couldn't turn them into ringwraiths.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Anyway, you can see why Tolkien is just one of my favorite of authors. So.
He's amazing. Yeah.
Yep.
I think Lord of the Rings is the best books ever written. They're just not my favorite. I fully acknowledge that. Like people, when they're like, "What's your favorite book?" and I'm like, "It's The Man Who Was Thursday," and they're like, "Really? That's your favorite?" And it's like, I didn't say it was the best. I said it was my favorite.
That's not bad. I mean, Man Who Was Thursday is actually one of my favorite Chesterton books, also.
Oh, it's
it's brilliant.
Yeah. So I stole him while you were gone, Kyle. He's going to come talk to me later. We're going to talk about The Man Who Was Thursday.
Perfect.
Yeah. He's going to be really disappointed with my conversation because it's not a topic that I know all that well. I do like the scene where they walk into a room and it's just filled with bombs and guns that are decorating all the walls and floors. That's just brilliant. But it's now been 2 hours, and I actually don't want to impose on your patience more than If you're out of questions and I've answered everything, you now know everything there is to know about John Wright.
Wow.
Everything there is no. Wow. Okay.
I feel like we
here's
could go
the
for.
thing. My political opinions are all really simple. If you ask me a political question, no matter what it is, I'm against it. No matter who started or who commenced it, I'm against it. So it's a very simple. It's an easy way to be in keeping with Catholic social teaching.
Nice.
I would be. I can't pronounce that word. So
The what?
I would be a distributist, but I don't know how to pronounce that word. So I'll just say that I believe in local solutions for local problems. Let me put it that way.
Subsidiaritist.
I can't say that word either. So you philosophers have very long, complicated terms. Now, if it was in Latin or Greek, I could wrap it out like no one's business.
Nice. Okay.
Or in Elvish. I also know a little bit of Tolkienian Elvish.
Well, so I guess as we wrap up here, then just remind us one more time, like where people can find you, where they can buy their book. I've seen multiple comments here go
to most of my books are on Amazon. If you go to my website, there's a link called Works where you can look up where my books are, and most of them I have linked to places where you can buy them. I've tried to keep that list up to date, but I'm between publishers right now for certain of my books. So some of them are just not available. And once or twice people have written me and asked me where to get a book, and I've just sent them a free copy, electronic copy, because I don't know where they're at. My wife, as in all good households, my wife handles all the business matters of the family, so she knows where the books are bought and sold.
Okay, excellent. And that's sci-fi-right.com, right?
Correct.
So okay, excellent. I say that like I'm not looking right at it right now.
Well, you're supposed to say it at least 7 times to make sure that it gets into the minds of the radio audience.
And it'll definitely be
sci-fi-right.com. Where was that again? Sci-fi-right.com.
Sci-fi-right.com. Yeah.
There we go.
So I'll have that. I'll have that in the description so people can come check you out. And then I guess how can they support you if people want to know more about you and they want to support your work? How do they go about doing that?
I also have I'm also a beggar in addition to being a science fiction writer. I have a Patreon account, and I have a Fund-Me account. The links are on my blog. Okay,
excellent. And
there's people who just give me money because I'm a Catholic science fiction writer who says the things that they wish they could say in public, and they're not in a position to be able to say them. But
yeah,
I fear God, so I don't fear man. So I can say things in public that other people can't say.
Yeah. Do you have any social media, like any channels or anything that we can plug? Or
I do have a weekly podcast called At the Mountains of Madness, which is me and Jason Rene, the editor of the short-lived Sci-Fi magazine that was Science Fiction Philosophy magazine, and we weekly put out a podcast, and you can find that on Substack, and you can find that on YouTube. It's called At the Mountains of Madness. No, excuse me, belay that. At the Mountains of Madness is the H.P. Lovecraft short story that I was stealing from. Against the Mountains of Madness, because the modern age has not just molehills of madness, but mountains of it that we have to oppose.
Okay. All right. So let's see here. And that is, I don't know. I'll get that link from you later. So
sure, I got it.
Okay, cool. So, all right.
It's at Against the Mountains of Madness on YouTube.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So I'm happy to plug that. So
I wanted to call it, I wanted to be about the Star Wars walking land tanks, and I wanted it to be at, and then so it would be at, and I couldn't, they wouldn't allow me to do that. So.
Nice. Okay. Well, cool. So, John, thank you so much for coming here. Thank you for taking time out of your day and doing this. I feel like we could go for so much longer, but I know Thursday's already like, no, we're gonna talk about other things on my channel.
Have me back again. I'd be happy to talk to you.
Oh yeah. Well, hey, next time I'm in the area, I'll definitely hit you up. So
okay, very good.
But excellent. Well, and for those of you who stuck around for all 2 hours of this, thanks for watching, and God bless. Now I'm going to end the stream, and it'll eventually end.